talk about it.
Can I take a second to talk about wildlife?
Yeah.
I didn't really get much chance to say too much there. Basically, the whole situation is displacement when this happens. And essentially animals try to move into another place where there's good habitat for them, but that's already taken up. So you wind up with diminished populations. You can't say, well, there are some extirpated species that dwindle and disappear. The songbirds that come back to the forest year after year, there's no forest for them. And one other thing I don't realize I gotta be quick here. When you set up these islands, the genetics doesn't work. So 13% is useless if you don't have a way for the animals to move around between those spots. So you're dead on, we're in trouble in terms of the other species, and they don't vote. So they just die quietly or wander around until they do so. And it's not good.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next speaker. Okay, we're just running out of time.
Good afternoon, Neil Livingston. I really wanted to talk about and ask the panelists, what do we need to create change? What will make change happen? For instance, if everyone went home tonight, and if you haven't looked at it, looked at Global Forest Watch's site, and you can zoom in on Nova Scotia, and you'll basically see since 2003, the province has had a huge amount of cutting, as we've seen inside of some of the slides, but cumulatively, the whole province is almost becoming a tree plantation. We've heard that you can't tell private landowners what to do and how many there are, but one of the private landowners, or Pulp owns over 1 million acres or some other holding company. So I wanted to stress that to make change, we're going to need regulation, and as a woodlot owner, when you get change, it's good. You have less destruction of the environment, you have maintenance of the forest ecosystem. But if you look at Quebec, if you look at New Brunswick, woodlot owners get paid more. If you look at Quebec, where you can't cut hardwood forests, they get paid more. If you look at Ontario, where you can't cut hardwood forests and you have to do very careful management, the woodlot owners get paid more. And we have a problem here, and the problem is that the system has made private woodlot owners slaves for about 50 years. Wood is a very valuable commodity, and if we're going to preserve the ecosystem, we need to get out of this slavery mentality and start getting value out of our forest from getting paid properly from proper utilization. And one other comment I had to make, and I'm interested to hear from the panelists, is in 2008 I won Eastern County's Woodlot Owner of the Year by having industrial machinery, harvesters, and large porters come to my property to do selection cutting. So my theory and my practice is that we could stop clear cutting in Nova Scotia in 1 week. The operators know how to do it with those machines, and we could be out of this paradigm into a much better paradigm. I would be interested in hearing a comment from anyone. And it takes regulation, and regulation is important.
I would just like to comment quickly. All the science to properly manage our forests is out there. There is proper science that's out there. I own a woodlot. I have worked it. I have worked on other people's woodlots. I'm not against cutting trees. I believe to manage your forest, you have to be in there. I'm not against machinery either. It has its place. What I am against is clear cutting, and I'm against biomass. And these two practices are a burden on our backs. We are trying to swim. Our teachers are, this week, people are going to have to find babysitters for the kids because they get to work. We get all these money for these large, massive corporations who have lots of money, and they are taking our resource, and we have a huge burden on our back. We're trying to swim, and the policies in place. This book here, I would recommend to everybody. It's called Restoring the Acadian Forest. All the methodology and science and practices to manage our forests properly are here. And they're here in this natural balance. They're all here. We have everything we need to manage our forests properly. It is not being implemented. The will of Nova Scotians is not being listened to. And we have a department of government which is in the hands of industry. And this is creating all of our problems. We know how to manage our forests.
So again, I think some points brought out very good. You're absolutely correct. That we've put a lot of effort into in providing training so that we could use those machines that are there so they could be used on selective harvesting. And so where it's possible, absolutely they could. I think Sam's got a great point. Stuff is here, nobody disputes it. It is there. I said 77% of the wood came from private land. No, that's just not true. You can, Mr. Trump has made it famous that you can make statements in public, you don't have to fact check that. That's just not true. But the simple piece of this is, we as Nova Scotians.
Let me ask you a question, Carl. You mentioned 4.2 million hectares of forested land in Nova Scotia. Is that number you used? Yes. Okay, and then so we're taking 35,000 hectares a year, basically. That 4.2 million figure you gave, does that include the land that's in protected areas?
I don't believe so, Jeff, but I can double check that for you.
You don't think that includes
What I can tell you is that that harvest that I referred to represents 0.83% of the province.
Right.
So take
take
13% off of it, and even if 13% comes off there, it still balances you.
Does it? See, here's the problem. I would characterize your presentation as one of false equivalency. For instance, you referred to the Bowater lands as being clear cut 100 years ago. I'm sorry, when did you say it was clear cut?
I said that what I said was, where did the lands come from? They were put together from what were largely holdings from sawmill companies that had harvested them. And then once Bowater got them, the dominant form of harvesting throughout that 68 years or so of their tenure was in fact clear cut.
Okay. The other question that I found, I actually wrote your minister a letter about this because I was interested. Where do you think the nitrogen fixers are going to come from in the middle of a clear cut? What will fix nitrogen in the middle of a clear cut?
Well, Jeff, as you and I both know, nitrogen comes from a number of different areas.
Yeah, but what's going to fix it? Not where does nitrogen come from, but what are the nitrogen fixers in a clear cut? What's going to make that nitrogen that's on the site available for use by the plants and animals that live on it?
I have a feeling you want to tell us.
No, I'm asking you. Where are the nitrogen fixers in a clear cut?
They're in the plant community, Jeff.
Where? What plant? What plant community in a clear cut has nitrogen fixers?
In the immediate aftermath of a clear cut, depending on what's coming up, there are different plants that do it at different rates, Jeff.
Yes, but so in other words, when at the end of a clear cut, there are no nitrogen fixers on the clear cut. So you have to wait now for the trees to start growing. The pioneer hardwoods were associated with that. But in the meantime, there are no nitrogen fixers there. And if you then follow that up with herbiciding, which I know we don't do in Stora, and the reason we don't do it in Stora is I'm pleased to say that the last president of Stora Copperberg that used herbicides was on his way to a meeting to be fired, and he pulled his car over to the side of the road and blew his brains out. So that's why we don't herbicide on Cape Breton Island. I realize a lot of you guys don't know that. The reason we don't herbicide here is because the Swedish environmental groups in Sweden wouldn't stand for it. That's why Cape Breton Island isn't sprayed.
I'm sorry, I may agree with you, but I cannot celebrate. I cannot accept you saying that somebody's going to bring a positive celebration.
All right, I just want to make an announcement. We're 4 o'clock. There's a lot of interest here. Some people may need to go home, but I think I'd like to give the opportunity for the other people that are waiting here to ask some questions and keep it as brief as possible. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Danuszewski. I have a question for everyone here. The question is, how many people here trust that the government of Nova Scotia will protect our forests? If you believe that, please raise your hands. We have, I think I see 2 or 3 hands. How many people here believe that Port Hawkesbury Paper is responsible enough to protect the forests in Nova Scotia? Raise your hands.
The forests that they're working.
Okay, I see another 4 or 5 hands. I would encourage everybody here to recognize your own power, your own energy. You're here, you all have opinions. Spread the word. Tell your friends. Tell your family. Tell your neighbors. Write the people on this list, because we all have the potential to make small change and roll it into larger change.
Hi, my name is Minga O'Brien. For the record, I've got a Bachelor of Science, a Master of Science, and I'm also a forest technician, and my Master of Science is in forest ecology. And I also happen to really love numbers and stats and research, and embrace facts and good science. And back in 2011, I worked with a few other authors on the GPI forest accounts, General in Progress Index forest accounts, where we used and synthesized, summarized an enormous amount of data, largely Department of Natural Resources data, a lot of their forest inventory data, and synthesized that into a 450-page report, both volumes of which are online, GPI forest accounts volume 1 and 2. And what was really interesting is that we used that data and portrayed results that Department of Natural Resources had never used that same data to show. We showed the loss of older age classes, the incredible increase in younger age classes, the loss of the shade-tolerant tree species, and the increase in the shade-intolerant tree species. We showed all kinds of things. And you know what Department of Natural Resources did? Using the facts, the stats, the numbers. As I said, I love crunching numbers, I love stats. We used all that. Do you know what they did? They separated themselves as much as they could from that information. And then they said, oh no, you can't use that data for that purpose. No, you shouldn't use that forest inventory data, you should use the PSP data, permanent sample plot data. But they were using that same forest inventory data to make estimates of how much wood we could harvest every year on a sustainable basis. They're using that same data for all kinds of purposes, but as soon as we showed things that they didn't want to see and looked uncomfortable for them, they tried to separate themselves from it. So I say this, Mr. Eddy, is that I've actually been at meetings with the Forest Technical Advisory Committee to the Minister and heard one of your predecessors, Ed McCauley, basically quote information to the people on that committee that represented the heads of all kinds of different organizations, silviculture, woodlot owner, other organizations, and we were there to provide advice to the Minister of Natural Resources at the time. And that Ed McCauley, the then DNR's head of renewable resources, constantly spewed lies to that group. And I knew the data of your inventory better than he would, and I would quote it back to him and say, your own data shows this, this, and this. He didn't even know the information that was being produced by his own department. But that's actually not even what I came up here to talk about. I heard a lot of things today. One of them being Bowater and that, the jewel in the crown. Well, you didn't mention that Ralph Johnson, who was the chief forester for Bowater Mersey for 30 years, implemented the first selection harvesting regime in Nova Scotia for 30 years, 1935 to 65. He wrote Forests of Nova Scotia, one of the best books out there on the forests and the history of the forests in the province. Lots of data, and I strongly believe that the reason Bowater had something to harvest after Ralph Johnson was no longer the chief forester was likely because there was so much good stuff left, because he had done this incredible selection harvesting regime for 30 years. And so what they have and what was left when the Crown bought Bowater lands was to some extent a legacy of the good work that Ralph Johnson had been implemented. But even more to the spirit of what I want to talk about is the rotten foundation upon which Department of Natural Resources bases their science, and that is their forest disturbance report. This is their science produced by a group of people who are all foresters, not people with science backgrounds, foresters. They don't have masters in science, they don't have bachelors in science, they have bachelors in forestry. And they produced a report called The Forest Disturbances of Nova Scotia. It was put out in 2017 for peer review, largely because I kept saying to the then head of the forestry division, you have to put this out for peer review. You have to put this out for peer review. And finally, he did. And that's because I had talked many times to colleagues that I had worked with and among in the government and outside who were so horrified by this report and the lack of good science in this report. It was basically like they started with an agenda in this report. The end result was, let's figure out how we can justify all the clear cutting and work backwards and try to show the science justifying that kind of management approach. And that report, when it went out for peer review, scientists from all across Eastern North America reviewed that report, and they were all scathing. All of those comments that came back to Department of Natural Resources were all scathing. And how do I know that? Because I did a FOIPOP request and got held of every single one of those critiques and reviews that were submitted to Department of Natural Resources. My own thesis advisor, Bill Freeman, late Bill Freeman, PhD in forest ecology, I saw him struggle through reviewing it. He had 7 pages of notes critiquing that report after reading 1 page alone of that report. He was pulling his hair out.